never thought the most humiliating and intimate moment of my adult life would happen at the hands of my own sister-in-law. I am just a regular 32-year-old guy with a steady job and a wife of more than I probably deserve. But this stubborn case of phimosis had been bothering me for years, quietly stealing pieces of my confidence every time things got close with her. I kept putting off the circumcision, telling myself it wasn't that bad, that I could live with it, until the ache grew louder than the shame and I finally scheduled the procedure. Everything felt so ordinary that morning. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. I sat in the waiting room flipping through an old magazine, heart hammering like I was waiting for a root canal instead of a simple fix. The nurse called my name with a polite smile and led me down the hallway. Then she pushed open the door, and there she was, Dr. Elena, my wife's younger sister, standing there in pale blue scrubs, chart in hand, stethoscope draped around her neck like it belonged there, a few loose pulled back neatly, a few loose strands brushing her cheek. Those familiar eyes, sharp, confident, the same ones that teased me across the dinner table at every family gathering, lifted to meet mine. Time slowed. My stomach dropped so fast I forgot how to breathe. "I didn't know it was you," she said quietly, voice steady but carrying that tiny flicker of surprise that made everything feel suddenly too real. Elena had always been the one who intimidated me a little. Successful urologist at 30, sharp-witted, quick with a laugh that could cut through any awkward silence, off-limits in every possible way. My wife's sister. Family, the woman who remembered my coffee order and once helped my wife pick out my birthday gift without ever crossing a line. Now she was about to become my surgeon. The power imbalance hit me like a wave. She was the doctor, calm and control, gloved hands already moving with practiced efficiency. I was the patient, about to lie there exposed, vulnerable in the most humiliating way imaginable. And she was family. Blood-related by marriage, but close enough that every holiday photo included both of us smiling like nothing was wrong. My mind screamed, this can't be happening. She's my wife's sister, how am I supposed to lie here while she heat-flooded my face? I wanted to bolt, to demand another doctor, to make up some excuse about privacy or scheduling. But the thought of explaining this to my wife, telling her why I couldn't go through with it, why I was suddenly terrified, made my chest tighten even more. What kind of man lets his sister-in-law see him like this? What kind of weak, ashamed mess does that make me? I muttered something incoherent about maybe switching doctors, voice cracking like a teenager. Eleanor's expressions softened, but only for a second. Professional calm slipped back into place like a mask. "It's strictly professional," she said gently, eyes holding mine just long enough to make my pulse stutter. "I understand this is uncomfortable, but I'm one of the best at this procedure. You're in good hands." Her words were meant to reassure. Instead, they sent a strange electricity through me, warm, unwanted, terrifying, because part of me knew she was right. And another part, the part I hated, couldn't stop noticing how close she was standing. The faint scent of lavender hand sanitizer drifting from her wrists, the way her scrubs hugged her shoulders as she turned to check the instruments. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to swallow me, yet my feet stayed rooted. The shame burned hotter than the medical necessity that had brought me here. My wife's sister. My sister-in-law, the woman who had sat across from me at Thanksgiving last year, laughing at my bad jokes while my wife squeezed my hand under the table. Now she was about to see every hidden part of me and never wanted anyone but my wife to know. I swallowed hard, throat dry. Elena glanced at the chart again, then back at me. Her voice dropped even lower, almost a whisper meant only for this room. "We can do this quickly and cleanly. No one else needs to know the details, but I already knew. Nothing about this moment would ever feel clean again." The nurse adjusted the thin gown on the table, the paper crinkling loudly in the sudden silence. Elena stepped closer, gloved hand resting lightly on the edge of the bed, professional, distant, yet impossibly near. My heart hammered so loud I was sure she could hear it. And then she looked at me one more time, that flicker of something unreadable crossing her face again. Something that made me wonder if she felt the same forbidden gravity pulling between us. Elena stood there in her scrubs, chart in hand, her voice slipping into that measured cadence she used when she explained things at family dinners. "You're doing great so far. she said, the same gentle tone that once teased me for being the quiet one across the table. I lay there under the thin gown, paper crinkling every time I shifted, trying to keep my breathing even. Her gloved fingers adjusted the sterile drapes, brushing my thigh just once. Accidental, clinical, nothing more, yet that fleeting warmth threw the latex scent, an unwanted spark racing up my spine, heat pooling low in my stomach before I could stop it. The faint lavender from her sanitizer cut through the sharp antiseptic air, wrapping around me like a secret I wasn't supposed to notice. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the holes, anything to pull my mind away from how close she was standing. She was my wife's sister, the woman who had passed me the mashed potatoes last Thanksgiving without ever letting her fingers linger. Now her hands moved with quiet authority, explaining each step in her calm, professional voice while my pulse hammered in my ears. This can't be real. Her touch grew more precise as she prepared the local anesthesia, fingers steady and deliberate against skin that suddenly felt too sensitive. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to think of work deadlines, of traffic, of anything safe and distant. But her voice kept pulling me back, soft and reassuring, the same one that had once laughed at my lame jokes over coffee. "You're handling this well," she murmured, and the words landed like a caress I had no right to feel. Heat climbed my neck, burning my cheeks even as the numbness began to spread, cool and tingling. Still, deeper inside, something stirred. A forbidden awareness of her nearness, the way her body leaned in just enough for me to sense her presence without seeing. I hated how my breath caught, how the room's quiet amplified every small sound. The rustle of her scrubs, the faint click of instruments, Chef's family, off-limits in every way that matters. Yet my mind kept circling back to the gravity between us, that invisible pull like owlent name without feeling sick with shame. The procedure moved forward, the space between us feeling impossibly small despite the sterile barriers. Every careful motion of her hands sent tiny ripples through me. Not pain, not exactly, but an intimacy I had never asked for. The cool edge of metal against skin, the steady hum of the monitor in the background, all of it wove together into something too personal, too charged. I became hyper-aware of her breathing behind the mask, measured and focused, each inhale a reminder that she was right there, controlling every moment with practiced ease. My thoughts fractured. This is wrong. She's my sister-in-law, the last person who should see me like this. But her competence wrapped around the vulnerability like a dangerous comfort, making the shame twist into something sharper, hotter. I wondered if she could feel it too. That strange electricity humming beneath the professional surface. Or was it only me, trapped in this obsessive loop, craving the very closeness that terrified me? Her eyes stayed locked on her work above the mask, yet I caught the subtle shift in her posture, the way she paused for half a breath as if the air had thickened. Lavender drifted closer again as she adjusted her stance, and my chest tightened with the weight of it all. I wanted to speak, to break the tension with some casual remark like we did at barbecues. But the words stuck, swallowed by the humming silence and the terrifying realization that part of me didn't want this moment to end. Not yet, not when her control felt like it was rewriting something inside me I couldn't name. The instruments moved with quiet precision, each second stretching longer than the last, pulling me deeper into this suspended haze where family lines blurred and desire whispered too close to guilt. As another careful touch landed, her gaze flickered up to mine for a fraction longer than necessary. Something unspoken passing between us that made my heart slam against my ribs, leaving me breathless with the fear of what might come next if the nurse didn't return soon. Halfway through, guilt slammed into me like cold water, pulling the air from my lungs. She's my wife's sister, my brother-in-law's wife. This is betrayal layered on betrayal, every family tie unraveling in real time under these harsh lights. Yet there I was, completely exposed, and her steady hands never wavered, offering a strange kind of safety I had no right to accept. My chest tightened until it hurt. How could something clinical feel so dangerously close? The radio in the corner kept playing low, that old song Wonderwall drifting through the sterile air like a ghost from better days. I could almost hear all of us around the backyard grill last summer, laughing too loud, singing off-key while burgers sizzled and kids ran barefoot. Now the same melody wrapped around this moment, making the contrast unbearable. Family, trust, and here I was, letting her see parts of me no one else ever should. I tried to breathe normally, but each inhale came shallow, trembling. "Stop this," my mind screamed. "Walk away if you could," but the numbness held me in place and her voice kept anchoring me. "You're doing fine," she said softly, the words brushing against my skin even through the mask. "Competence and care," the same gentle tone she used when she helped my wife plan holiday dinners. It twisted the knife deeper. The lavender scent grew stronger as she leaned in for the next precise step, her body heat pressing just enough through the thin barrier of scrubs to make my pulse stutter. Shame burned hot in my throat, yet I couldn't look away from the way her shoulders moved with such quiet focus. Part of me wanted to pull back, to shatter the spell with some awkward joke about the weather or traffic outside. But another part, a darker, hungrier part, surrendered to the weight of her full attention. It felt like drowning in slow motion, warm and terrifying all at once. I hated myself for noticing how her gloved fingers worked with such tenderness, each motion careful, almost reverent. The ache inside wasn't just physical anymore. It was this magnetic pull, this craving to stay suspended in her gaze a little longer, even as guilt clawed at my ribs, telling me this was the line we could never uncross. "Chess family," I repeated silently, like a prayer or a curse. "Off-limits in every way that could destroy us both." Yet the trust building between her steady hands and my vulnerability felt heavier than any moral warning. The song swelled faintly in the background, lyrics about wonder walls and saving grace hitting too close, reminding me of lazy afternoons where Elena would tease me about burning the stakes while my wife rolled her eyes in that fond way. Now those memories collided with the cool metallic glide against sensitive skin, the faint rustle of fabric as she adjusted her stance, the way her breath stayed even and controlled while mine fractured into short, desperate pulls. I let the indulgence take hold then, just for a heartbeat. Let myself feel the full gravity of her nearness without fighting it, the texture of forbidden closeness, the strange relief of being held together by someone who knew me too well and not well enough. Heat bloomed low in my belly, mixing with the spreading numbness until everything blurred into one dangerous haze. This shouldn't feel good. It shouldn't feel like anything at all. But her voice guiding each tiny step wrapped around me like silk, pulling me deeper into surrender I knew I would regret. And still the guilt whispered louder, reminding me of my wife's trusting smile, of holidays where Elena sat across the table passing potatoes with that easy laugh. How many times had we all hugged goodbye, innocent and warm? Now that innocence lay shattered on this narrow table, replaced by something electric and irreversible. When she finally reached the last careful suture, the room seemed to hold its breath with me. Her eyes lifted over the mask, locking onto mine for one long, loaded second that stretched far beyond anything professional. The air between us thickened, heavy with everything we weren't saying. "All done," she whispered, voice barely carrying above the fading song, but her hand stayed on my knee a fraction longer than necessary, the warmth seeping through the thin glove like a secret promise. In that single suspended instant, the last fragile boundary dissolved completely. I felt it in my bones, in the sudden racing of my heart. This touch now lived inside me, intimate in ways no one could ever take back. My body carried the memory of her hands, her scent, her quiet control, and I knew with terrifying clarity that nothing between us could ever be the same again. The silence stretched, humming with unspoken possibility, and I wondered if she felt it too. That irreversible shift pulling us both toward whatever came next. The family dinner unfolded like any other Sunday evening, plates clinking softly under the warm kitchen light while laughter bounced between stories of work and weekend plans, saying how grateful we both were that Elena had handled everything with such care. The air in the room shifted. Elena's gaze met mine across the table for the briefest flicker, something raw and unspoken flashing there before she looked away, her fingers tightening around her fork. My phone vibrated against my thigh right then, the screen lighting up with her name. "We need to talk about what happened in that room." Stomach dropped, pulse hammering so loud I was sure someone would hear. One careless word, one lingering glance too long, and the fragile piece we'd all been pretending it would crack wide open. I told myself the next afternoon's meeting was only to clear the heavy silence between us, nothing more. We slipped into a quiet corner cafe far from home, the kind with dim lighting and distant chatter that felt safe enough to hide in. Ellen arrived first, her hair loose around her shoulders, that faint lavender scent drifting toward me before I even sat down. I can't stop thinking about it, she admitted, voice low and trembling, eyes fixed on the table as if afraid to meet mine fully. We started with careful words, retracing the sterile lights and the way her voice had guided me through every careful moment, the strange trust that had bloomed in vulnerability. But the conversation curved, pulling us closer without either of us moving. Her knee brushed mine under the small table, warm through fabric, sending sparks racing up my spine. I forgot how to breathe properly. The memory of her steady hands resurfaced, not clinical anymore but alive with a heat that made my skin prickle. We weren't touching. Not really, yet the space between us crackled like static before a storm, heavy with everything we both knew we shouldn't want. She leaned in just a fraction, her breath warm against the side of my face as she whispered how the procedure had felt different with me, how the usual distance had vanished into something dangerously personal. My hand hovered near hers on the tabletop, inches apart, trembling with the effort not to close the gap. Guilt clawed at me, sharp and insistent, reminding me of my wife's trusting eyes at dinner, of all the family holidays where Elena had been just the helpful sister-in-law. This was wrong in every way that could shatter lives. Yet the pull was stronger, a gravity I couldn't fight, drawing me toward surrender I knew would change us forever. No scrub separated us now, no mask hid her expressions, and when our eyes finally locked again, the decision settled in silence. We couldn't go back. Not after this, the almost touch lingered, electric and aching, as the caffeine oils faded into a distant hum around our shared secret. Now the days stretch out in quiet torment. Every family gathering feels like walking a tightrope over an abyss, her lavender scent catching me off guard in the hallway or across the room, pulling me right back into that suspended moment. Whispers her name with every shift of fabric. My wife smiles at me the same as always, unaware, and I smile back while inside everything burns with what we almost did. What we did in that charged silence. It was supposed to be nothing more than a medical fix, a quick chapter closed and forgotten. Instead, it became the most devastatingly intimate thing I've ever carried, a secret that lies under my skin and in every stolen glance with Elena. I know it's wrong. I know the risks could unravel everything we've built. Yet a part of me clings to the ache, refusing to let go completely. The hunger remains, quiet and unrelenting, like a storm cloud that never quite breaks. Tell me honestly, what would you have done if your sister-in-law became your circumcision surgeon? Or let it change everything? Let me know in the comments. I might share what happened next if enough of you want to hear it.